When the silver mask finally fell from the champion's face, the emperor didn't just gasp, he fell backward off his golden throne, screaming a name that belonged to a ghost he thought he had buried 10 years ago. Hey friends, welcome. I'm Marcus. Another incredible gladiator story for you today. This isn't just a story about blood and sand, it's about the cost of a human soul. Let me know where you're watching from and please hit that subscribe button. Let's get started. Understand that the silence in the Colosseum that day was heavier than the stone blocks it was built from. 50,000 people were watching, but no one was breathing. For 3 years, the gladiator known only as the Mirror had been a myth made of flesh and steel. He walked into the arena wrapped in shadows, wearing a black tunic that invited death and a featureless silver helmet that reflected the terrified faces of his opponents. He never spoke. He never celebrated. He simply killed with a terrifying, silent efficiency. But today, the anticipation was suffocating. Emperor Septimus, a man whose paranoia was as legendary as his cruelty, had ordered this specific match not for entertainment, but for an execution. He had been having nightmares about that silver mask. He had seen it in his sleep, speaking with a voice that sounded like the brother he had murdered to take the throne. Septimus needed to see the face behind the steel. He needed to know if he was going crazy. Or if the past had come back to collect a debt. To understand the terror in the emperor's eyes, you have to go back 10 years. Septimus wasn't born to rule. He was the second son, the spare. His older brother, Valerius, was the heir. Valerius was everything Septimus wasn't: brave, honorable, beloved by the legions. A week before Valerius was to be crowned, he vanished during a hunting trip near the cliffs of Capri. No body was ever found, only a blood-stained cloak. Septimus wept the loudest at the funeral, and then immediately seized the crown. But the crown sat heavy on his head. He purged the Senate. He taxed the poor until they starved. He ruled through fear because he knew that deep down he was an imposter. And then, the Mirror appeared. The Mirror didn't fight for money. He fought for the crowd. He donated his winnings to the widows of the soldiers Septimus had sent to die in useless wars. The people worshipped him. They called him the Spirit of Rome. And Septimus hated him for it. He saw the way the mob looked at the masked man, with hope. Hope is dangerous for a tyrant. So, Septimus arranged the ultimate test. He summoned Titus the Breaker. Titus was not a man, he was a siege weapon wrapped in skin. Standing 7 feet tall and wielding a war hammer that weighed as much as a small horse, Titus was famous for one thing: he didn't just kill his opponents, he obliterated them. He turned bones to dust. Septimus had given Titus a simple order: do not kill him quickly. Shatter the mask first. I want to see his face before he dies. The referee blew the horn. The sound cut through the humid air like a knife. You have to imagine the physics of this fight. It was a fly fighting a mountain. The Mirror stood in the center of the sands, his silver helmet gleaming in the merciless sun. He looked small compared to the behemoth charging at him. Titus didn't run, he rumbled. The ground shook with every step. Thud. 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 The sound echoed in the chests of the spectators. Titus raised the war hammer, a block of black iron, and swung it with a grunt that sounded like a bear roaring. The Mirror didn't block. You cannot block an avalanche. He moved. He flowed like water around a rock. He dropped to his knees, sliding under the arc of the hammer. The wind of the weapon passing over his head caused his black tunic to ripple violently. In the same motion, the Mirror slashed his short sword at Titus's hamstring. Clang. The blade sparked against hidden chainmail. Titus was armored like a tank. Is that all you have, little ghost? Titus laughed, his voice deep and gravelly. He spun around, surprisingly fast, and brought the hammer down in a vertical smash. The Mirror rolled. The hammer hit the sand, creating a shockwave that sprayed grit into the front rows. The impact left a crater deep enough to bury a man. If that had hit flesh, there would be nothing left to identify. Up in the imperial box, Septimus gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles were white. Hit him, he hissed. Stop playing and break him. The fight dragged on for 20 minutes. It was a masterclass in evasion. The mirror was tiring. You could see his chest heaving under the black fabric. The silver mask, designed for intimidation, was now a suffocating cage. He was trapping his own heat, breathing his own carbon dioxide. His movements were becoming a fraction of a second slower. Titus, on the other hand, was a machine of endless stamina. He kept coming. Swing after swing. Smash after smash. He was hurting the mirror toward the arena wall, cutting off his escape routes, and then, the moment came. The mistake, the mirror stepped back to avoid a backhand swing, but his heel caught on a discarded shield half buried in the sand. He stumbled. It was a tiny error, a momentary loss of balance, but in the arena, that is the difference between life and death. Titus saw it. He didn't swing the hammer. He dropped his shoulder and charged. He slammed into the mirror with the force of a battering ram. The mirror flew backward, air leaving his lungs in a sickening whoosh. He hit the stone wall of the arena with a bone-jarring crunch. He slid down the wall, dazed, his sword falling from his grip. The crowd screamed. Get up! Get up! Titus loomed over him, blotting out the sun. He didn't strike immediately. He remembered his orders. Shatter the mask. Titus dropped his hammer and reached down with a hand the size of a shovel. He grabbed the silver helmet. He didn't unlatch it. He squeezed. The metal groaned. The mirror thrashed, kicking at Titus's knees, but the giant was immovable. Titus pulled. He wrenched the helmet violently, the leather straps snapped. The silver mask came loose. Titus tossed the helmet aside. It rolled across the sand, coming to a stop at the feet of the referee. The mirror lay against the wall, his head bowed, his face hidden by a curtain of long, matted hair mixed with sweat and blood. He was gasping, coughing, his chest heaving. Septimus stood up. He leaned over the balcony, his eyes wide, his heart hammering against his ribs. Look at me, he screamed at the gladiator. Look at your emperor. The gladiator slowly lifted his head. He brushed the hair from his face. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of anticipation anymore. It was the silence of a tomb. The face revealed was not a stranger's. It was older than Septimus remembered. There was a jagged scar running from the left eye to the jaw. The skin was weathered by sun and salt. But the eyes, those piercing, ice-blue eyes were unmistakable. They were the eyes that had looked down at Septimus from every statue. Every painting, every coin of the previous reign. It was Valerius, the dead brother. The rightful heir. The ghost. Septimus felt the blood drain from his head. The world tilted. No, he whispered, stepping back. I killed you. I saw the blood. Valerius looked up at the golden box. He didn't look at the giant standing over him. He looked straight at the usurper. And then, he smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was a smile of reckoning. You saw what I wanted you to see, brother, Valerius said. His voice was raspy, damaged by smoke or screaming, but it carried to the top tier of the Colosseum. And now, Rome will see the truth. Septimus stumbled. His legs gave out. He fell backward, crashing into his throne, knocking over a table of wine. Kill him, he shrieked, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail of terror. Titus. Kill him now. Cut his head off. Don't let him speak. Titus looked confused. He looked at the emperor, who was scrabbling on the floor like a frightened rat. Then he looked down at the man he had just unmasked. He recognized the face too. Every soldier did. This was the man who had led them through the Alps. This was the general who had never lost a battle. Titus picked up his hammer. He raised it high. The shadow of the weapon fell over Valerius. The war hammer did not fall. For a terrifying, suspended second, the massive block of black iron hovered over Valerius's head, casting a shadow that looked like a tombstone. You have to understand that in that moment, the fate of the entire Roman Empire hung on the twitch of a single muscle in a giant's arm. Septimus was screaming from the balcony, his voice shredding the silence, "Do it! Crush him! I command you!" But Titus wasn't listening to the emperor. He was looking down at the man in the dust. He was looking at the scar on the face that he had followed into the frozen hell of the Alps 10 years ago. He remembered the night Valerius had given him his own cloak when Titus was freezing to death on guard duty. He remembered a general who ate last so his men could eat first. Titus's hands began to shake. Not from fear, but from the seismic shift of his own soul. He slowly lowered the hammer. He didn't drop it, he set it down with a deliberate, heavy thud that resonated through the floorboards of the arena. Then, the giant did something that made the 50,000 spectators gasp in unison. He stepped back, dropped to one knee, and bowed his head. "Ave, Imperator," Titus rumbled. His voice was deep, like stones grinding together, but everyone heard it. "Hail, Emperor." He wasn't hailing Septimus, the crowd erupted. It started as a whisper in the cheap seats, then a murmur in the merchant rows. And finally, a roar that shook the foundations of the Colosseum. "Valerius! Valerius! Valerius!" It was the sound of a dam breaking. 10 years of oppression, of starvation, of fear, it all poured out in that one name. Septimus stood in the imperial box, his face a mask of absolute terror. He looked at the Praetorian guard standing around him, his elite protectors, the best killers money could buy. "Silence them!" Septimus shrieked, spitting foam. "Kill the gladiator! Kill the giant! Kill everyone!" The Praetorian commander, a man named Cassius with cold, dead eyes, drew his sword. He didn't care about sentiment. He cared about orders. He signaled to the cohort stationed at the gate of death. "Advance," he barked. "Purge the arena." 50 Praetorian guards marched onto the sand. They moved in a phalanx formation, shields locked, spears bristling like a porcupine of steel. They were a machine designed to crush riots. Valerius stood up. He was unarmed. He was wounded. He was exhausted. But as he stood next to Titus, he didn't look like a victim. He looked like a wolf who had just found his pack. "Titus," Valerius said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "Can you hold the left flank?" Titus grinned, picking up his massive hammer. "For you, General." "I can hold the gates of Hades." Valerius scanned the ground. He picked up the short sword he had dropped earlier. It was chipped and heavy. A gladiator's tool, not a general's weapon. But in his hands, it looked like Excalibur. You have to picture this, 2 men against 50. A giant and a ghost standing in the center of the world, while an ocean of black armor moved to swallow them. The first wave of Praetorians hit them. It was a collision of meat and metal. Titus swung his hammer. Crack. The sound of a shield shattering, and the arm behind it, echoed like a thunderclap. Titus swept the weapon in a wide arc, sending 3 heavily armored guards flying through the air like ragdolls. He was a force of nature. But Valerius was an artist. He didn't rely on brute strength. He moved through the gaps in the phalanx. He ducked under a spear thrust, slashed the tendons of a guard's knee, spun, and drove the pommel of his sword into the helmet of another. He was fighting with the efficiency of a man who had no energy to waste, but there were too many of them. A spear tip grazed Valerius's ribs, opening a fresh wound. Another guard bashed Titus with a shield, staggering the giant. The circle was closing. They were going to die. It was simple math. Septimus was laughing now. He was leaning over the rail, watching his brother bleed. Yes. Bleed him. Cut him into pieces and feed him to the dogs, but Septimus had forgotten one variable. The people, you know that feeling when you see a bully hurting someone you love? That collective rage that bypasses logic. The crowd in the Colosseum wasn't just watching anymore. They were remembering. They remembered the bread Valerius had given them. They remembered the peace. And now, they saw him fighting for his life against the tyrant's butchers. It started in the lower tiers. A merchant threw a wine jug at a guard. Then a seat cushion. Then a sandal. Then, a man, a simple baker with nothing to lose, jumped the wall. He landed on the sand, armed only with a loose stone. Then another jumped. Then 10. Then 100, citizens. Valerius roared, his voice cutting through the din. Rome does not belong to him. It belongs to you. That was the spark. The mob didn't just riot, they invaded. Thousands of spectators flooded the arena floor. They didn't have armor or weapons. But they had numbers, and they had rage. They swarmed the Praetorian guards like ants swarming a beetle. They pulled them down, ripped their shields away, beat them with fists and stones. The perfect formation of the guards collapsed under the sheer weight of humanity. Valerius stood in the center of the storm, untouched. The people formed a protective ring around him. They touched his shoulders, his arms, weeping, crying out his name. He wasn't a gladiator anymore. He was Caesar. He looked up at the box. Septimus was alone. His guards had either fled or been swallowed by the mob. The Emperor of Rome was backing away from the railing, his golden robes tangled around his legs. Valerius walked toward the stairs that led to the imperial box. The crowd parted for him. Titus walked a step behind him, carrying his hammer, his armor dented but his spirit unbroken. They ascended the marble steps. Every footfall was a judgment. When they reached the top, the remaining guards at the door looked at Valerius. They looked at the blood on his face, the sword in his hand, and the fire in his eyes. They didn't fight. They sheathed their swords, stepped aside, and bowed. They knew the reign of Septimus was over. Valerius kicked the golden doors open. Septimus was cowering behind his throne. He had a dagger in his hand, but he was holding it like a child holds a stick. He was trembling so violently that his jewelry rattled. "Stay back." Septimus squealed. "I am the emperor. I am a god." Valerius walked forward. He didn't raise his sword. He didn't shout. He just looked at his brother with a sadness that was more cutting than hate. "You are not a god, Septimus," Valerius said softly. "You are just a frightened little boy who stole a cloak that was too big for him. I killed you." Septimus cried, tears streaming down his face. "I pushed you. I watched you fall into the sea. You're dead. You're a ghost." "I survived," Valerius said, stepping closer. "A fisherman found me. Broken. Bleeding. I lost my memory for a year. I lived as a slave. I worked in the mines. I fought in the pits. And do you know what I learned, brother? I learned what you never did. I learned what it means to suffer. I learned what your taxes do to families. I learned what your wars do to sons." Valerius stopped inches from the throne. He reached out and grabbed the dagger from Septimus's hand. Septimus didn't even resist. He collapsed to his knees, clutching Valerius's tunic. "Please," Septimus begged, sobbing into the fabric. "Please, brother. I'll give it back. I'll go away. I'll go to a monastery. Just don't kill me. Don't kill your own blood." Valerius looked down at the pathetic creature sobbing at his feet. He looked at the golden crown that had fallen onto the floor. He picked it up. It was heavy. "Cold." "I won't kill you," Valerius said. Septimus looked up. Hope sparking in his wet eyes. Thank you, I am not a murderer," Valerius continued, his voice hardening. "But I am also not a fool. You cannot live in Rome. You cannot live in the empire." Valerius turned to Titus. "Take him. Put him on a ship. Send him to the island of exile. No servants. No gold. No wine. Let him live the rest of his days catching his own fish and mending his own nets. Let him see if he can survive the life he forced on so many others. Titus nodded. He grabbed Septimus by the back of his neck, lifting him off the ground like a naughty puppy. Septimus screamed and kicked, but against the giant, he was nothing. As Titus dragged the screaming tyrant out of the box, the crowd below saw them. They cheered, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Valerius walked to the balcony. He stood there, the golden crown in his hand. He looked at the chaos, the blood, the people. He didn't put the crown on his head. He placed it on the railing. People of Rome, he shouted. The nightmare is over. He didn't promise them riches. He didn't promise them world conquest. He promised them justice. And for the first time in 10 years, they believed him. Flash forward 5 years, the Colosseum is different now. The blood sports are gone. It is a place for plays, for races, for athletic competitions. In the center of the royal box sits Emperor Valerius. He is older, his hair graying, the scar on his face a permanent reminder of his journey. Beside him sits his captain of the guard, a giant named Titus, who wears a silver badge of honor on his chest. Valerius leans forward. He isn't watching a killing. He is watching a race. He smiles. It is a genuine smile. He rules with a firm hand, but a fair one. He rebuilt the Senate. He lowered the taxes. He healed the wound that Septimus had inflicted on the soul of the empire. They say that sometimes, late at night, Valerius goes down to the dungeons where the gladiators used to sleep. He sits in his old cell. He runs his hand over the stone walls. He reminds himself of the smell of fear. He reminds himself of the mask. Because he knows that the moment he forgets what it feels like to be powerless is the moment he stops being worthy of power. The masked champion didn't just win a fight that day. He won back the soul of a civilization. He proved that a face hidden by silver can see more truth than a face hidden by gold. This is Marcus. Thank you for watching. Valerius chose exile over execution for his brother. He chose mercy, but a harsh mercy. I want to ask you a difficult question. If your own brother betrayed you, stole your life, and tried to kill you, would you have the strength to spare him? Or would you have finished what he started? Be honest in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please subscribe. We tell the stories history tried to forget. Until next time, keep your mask off and your head up.